In this video, we'll talk about minor scales and how they differ from major scales, what the scale degrees are called in minor scales and those little differences, and about some variants of the minor scale, namely the harmonic and the melodic minor scales and their contrast to the natural minor scale. We have talked extensively about major scales and major keys at this point. It's time to turn to the other main scale used in Western classical music and a lot of other music too, called the minor scale. Like the major scale, the minor scale features 7 notes, all of which have adjacent letter names, or in other words, these are 7 steps. The minor scale differs from the major scale, though, because its internal structure of whole tones and semitones is different. What we have referred to in the past as the scale's DNA recipe, or a more fancy term, its inner intervallic structure. We can get a minor scale by playing the white keys of the keyboard, starting on A and ending on A, an octave higher. You'll remember that we did the similar experiment with major scales, and in that case we could get a major scale by playing the white keys of the keyboard from C to C. With the minor scale, it's from A to A. Here's how it sounds. Notice how the resulting sequence of whole tones and semitones is different from that of a major scale, which I've put both of them side by side here for you as a reference. Here in minor scales we have a whole tone, a semitone, 2 whole tones, a semitone, and another 2 whole tones to complete the scale. Because of this difference in this inner structure of the scale, a minor scale will sound very different from a major scale. Let me play the A minor scale once again, and then I'll play the A major scale. So it's starting on the same note, the same tonic, but listen to the difference that we perceive as listeners just because the order of whole tones and semitones is different in one scale from the other. So first A minor. Now A major. That difference in sound is actually quite significant. It comes with a lot of cultural baggage. There's often a talk of what these notes mean, right? What they convey, what emotions are they able to transmit to the listeners. And oftentimes the association is one of which the A minor, or for that matter, any minor scale, will sound sad or melancholy, or typically related to negative affects, perhaps desperation, things like that. Whereas the major scale is associated with positive affects like joy and happiness and sometimes even nostalgia. But however we perceive these differences in these more subjective terms, the point is that there is a perceptual difference in sound because the order of whole tones and semitones is different. What their meanings are is up to each of us and in society or culture as a whole, but the difference in sound is because of these whole tones and semitones. And like major scales, minor scales have particular names for each of their 7 scale degrees. Notice that most of the names are the same, except for a few notable differences. These are very important for you to take note of. I've put them in bold so it's easier to spot. The numbers are the same, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. The solfege syllables are the same except for scale degrees 3, 6, and 7. There we had, in major scales, we had do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and in minor scales, when we use the movable do system, we have do, re, me, this is pronounced me, fa, sol, le, te. Now, these differences help when doing solfege, and they have a logic behind them, which will become apparent when we talk about intervals in upcoming videos. Some people prefer to use the movable law system for minor scales, in which the names of the notes in Romance languages are applied to the syllables. So instead of starting on do, we would start on la, which is the name for A in Portuguese, French, Spanish, etc. So you'd have la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, scale degrees 1 through 7. Now this is, the movable law system is not as favored here in America as the movable do system is for major and minor scales. So if anything, this is just for reference. So you know that some people do this. And the scale degrees have their proper names as well. They're all the same except for scale degree number 7, which in minor scales is called the subtonic. It is not called the leading tone like in major scales because the subtonic is located, if you see here, G and A, the subtonic is located a whole tone away from tonic. The leading tone, if you'll remember, was located a semitone away. If we go back to A major, we'll have the G sharp next to A, that's a semitone away. This difference between leading tone and subtonic, caused by this difference of interval, of distance, a whole tone instead of a semitone, is actually very significant, as we'll see presently. Here is another table with the notes in A minor and the scale degrees and the 3 different ways we have to refer to them, right? Numbers, syllables, solfege syllables, and their proper names. And like with major scales as well, a minor scale may be transposed so that it may start on any given note. So we have the A minor scale, which is one that does not utilize any accidentals. It's played by using only the white keys of the keyboard. But if you transpose it, that is, if you apply the sequence of whole tones and semitones starting at any given note, you will get a minor scale. Like with major scales, when you do this act of transposition, you will inevitably run into the necessity, if you're outside of A minor, of having to use accidentals. Here I have transposed the A minor scale by an ascending perfect fifth to E minor, and also by a descending perfect fifth to D minor here. The results are the E minor scale and the D minor scale, both of which need accidentals as predicted in order to abide by this pattern of whole tones and semitones of a minor scale, the so-called DNA of a minor scale. Notice that E minor, a perfect fifth up from A minor, needs 1 accidental, namely 1 sharp. Here's A minor. Here's E minor. Like we have seen and heard previously, it sounds the same because the structure is, the intervallic structure is the same, but it's starting at a different height, right? At a different note there. D minor, on the other hand, sits a perfect fifth below from A minor, and it also needs 1 accidental, which is a flat, B flat. So E minor needs 1 accidental, a sharp, F sharp. D minor needs 1 accidental, the B flat. So do you already see the similarities that we have when transposing a scale by a perfect fifth with the transpositions we made with major scales? Each time we transpose a minor scale up by a perfect fifth, starting on A minor, we will need 1 additional sharp. And each time we transpose a minor scale down by a perfect fifth, starting on A minor, we will need 1 additional flat. It's the exact same pattern that emerged with major scales when we dealt with a circle of fifths. So it's important for us to know that this is happening also in transpositions of the minor scale, but we'll leave this subject at this point and come back to it in our next video that will delve more deeply in the transposition of the minor scale and in the circle of fifths, in special regards to minor scales and minor keys. Here is the same graph we had before with the scale degrees. This time I'm also providing E minor and D minor, so you can see that the notes change, but the names, the numbers, and syllables that refer to the scale degrees are the same. We have previously talked about relationships between scale degrees when we talked about major keys. There we mentioned that scale degree 1, or tonic, implies repose and stability, that scale degree 5, the dominant, implies tension and a yearning back to tonic. It wants to resolve and go back to tonic. It's time to define just one more relationship, that of the leading tone and the tonic. The leading tone, like the dominant, has a very strong pull towards tonic, sitting as it is a mere semitone away from tonic, right? So a leading tone, if we'll come back to A major perhaps, we'll see that the leading tone here is G sharp, and it's just a semitone away from A. It feels like it wants to go back. It has a very strong pull, almost like a gravitational pull, as if it were. So let me play that A major scale once again, and I'll stop at scale degree 7, at that leading tone. See, or better yet, hear, listen to how it feels unfinished. Right? There's a reason why we play scales from scale degree 1 to scale degree 1, because that leading tone, that scale degree 7 in major scales, has a very strong pull to do. And once again, we found stability and repose, right, in the tonic in scale degree 1. That strong gravitational pull that the leading tone exerts on the tonic, right, to go back to tonic, that is partially and greatly actually undermined in the minor scale, because we no longer have the interval of a semitone between scale degrees 7 and 1. Instead, we have just a whole tone between them, and that increased distance decreases the gravitational pull, so to speak. It works just like in physics, right? The greater the distance, the weaker the pull, and that's how it works in music as well. So, in minor keys, what is often done over the course of a composition or a song is that composers will often alter the minor scale, change the subtonic to a leading tone by raising that note, that scale's 7th scale degree, by 1 semitone, like you see here. By doing this, scale degree 7, now raised by a semitone, sits 1 semitone away from tonic and has a much stronger pull back to tonic. Let me play the first version of A minor with the subtonic. And then back to 1. So maybe it does have a pull, but it's much weaker, right? The subtonic is not as strong as the leading tone. Now I'll play the second version here with a raised 7th scale degree. Much stronger. It wants to go back to tonic. So that is often done as a recourse for composers to raise that subtonic into a leading tone by raising the 7th scale degree by a semitone. Thus is born the harmonic minor scale, which is a variant of the regular natural minor scale. The harmonic minor scale raises its 7th scale degree by a semitone, turning it from a subtonic into a leading tone, and thus increasing the pull that scale degree 7 has to resolve to tonic. The solfege syllable also changes. You will notice that it's no longer a te, it's called a t. The number of the scale degree is often notated as a sharp 7, like that. If you put only 7, I guess it should be fine, but often it's expressed in this way, sharp 7. This change in the natural minor scale, this raising of the 7th scale degree there, the turning of the subtonic into a leading tone is an artificial change. As we'll see later, it is not represented in the key signature, and composers only call on it occasionally as needed throughout the course of a song. We'll see an example very shortly. But it happens enough that it has become its own thing, its own variant of the normal or natural minor scale. However, the harmonic minor scale, by solving a problem, right, the weak pole of the subtonic, actually creates another in its place. Take a look at the pattern here of whole tones and semitones. Notice that between scale degrees 6 and 7, we have 3 semitones, the distance that is equivalent of a whole tone plus a semitone, right? This interval is larger than all steps we have encountered at this point in both major and minor scales, and is typically very hard to sing in tune. If a melody doesn't use scale degrees 6 and 7 in sequence or in close proximity, then the harmonic minor scale is perfect. It can be used without any problems. However, if one is asked to sing, or sometimes to play, scale degree 6 and then the raised scale degree 7, one after another, with that gap of 3 semitones between them, the result can be pretty jarring. Well, at least, to Baroque or classical ears, when these things were kind of being discussed and these conventions were being set, right, or talked about. So composers of that time and since, and from other times as well, came up with a solution, another variant of the minor scale that addressed this issue of the big gap of 3 semitones between scale degrees 6 and 7. By raising both scale degrees 6 and 7 of the minor scale, each by a semitone, the subtonic becomes a leading tone as desired before, and the gap between scale degrees 6 and 7 is reduced from 3 semitones to that of only 2 semitones, or in other words, a simple old-fashioned whole tone. Notice how the names of the scale degrees likewise change. The subtonic becomes a leading tone, as we have previously seen. The solfège syllable is T, the number now is a sharp 7, and scale degree 6 is now a sharp 6. It's no longer lay, it's a La now. But the proper name remains the same. It's still called a submediant, so that doesn't change. These things do change. This scale, by the way, is what is usually called the melodic minor scale, a natural minor scale with raised 6th and 7th scale degrees, each by a semitone. In practice, this scale was used mostly in Baroque and classical music in ascending melodies, right? Melodies that would go up. And if those melodies had to come back down, composers would revert back to the natural minor scales, so those accidentals would be naturalized, right? So they would do something like this. Maybe not as literal as just going up and down the scale, but that's the basic idea. Because the melodic minor scale was used in these upward gestures, ascending gestures, it is oftentimes also referred more specifically as the ascending melodic minor. And the descending melodic minor, which you can see here, is just like the natural minor scale, where scale degrees 6 and 7 are not raised. So here's a side-by-side comparison of the A natural minor scale and its two variants, the A harmonic minor with the raised 7th scale degree, and the A melodic minor with the raised 6th and 7th scale degrees. Every minor scale you can think of that's starting on any note, G minor, D minor, E minor, F sharp minor, whatever it is, all of these minor scales have also their two variants. All of them have their harmonic minor version and their melodic minor version. And composers use them as music requires them to. Okay, so as I said before, here's a good example of a song that is very famous and that utilizes the minor scale and its two variants. So we can see how they work. First, notice that there is no key signature, right? And we can surmise that it only uses white keys, so it's in the key of A minor. I have put here for you on top of the notes of the melody the numbers of the scale degrees, right? So we can better analyze or more easily analyze if the melody is using the natural minor, the harmonic minor, or the melodic minor scale. We also can notice that this is set for a piano because of a grand staff, right? Treble clef, bass clef linked with a brace. We can see also the time signature here, which is 6/8, and we know that that's compound meter, and that means 2 beats per bar. So it's a duple compound meter, in which each beat is equal to a dotted quarter note. Now, if we follow here the scale degree numbers, we'll see that we have 6 for the first 2 full measures here. We have 6 and 7, and they're not being raised, right? So these first 2 measures are using the notes as they're available in the A natural minor scale. If we go to our next 2 measures, you'll notice that twice 7 appears, and in both times it is G sharp, or in other words, it's G, the raised 7th scale degree, right? On the left hand here, we also have this chord using E, G sharp, and B. So every time the G appears in these 2 measures here, it's G sharp. So here, we don't have any evidence of 6 appearing in any of these 2 measures. So for the next 2 bars, we're using a harmonic minor. Bar 5 and 6 mirror what has happened here before in bars 1 and 2, right? It's a parallel to those. So we're once again back to a natural minor scale. And for the next 2 bars, or at least for the next bar, bar 7, we are seeing raised 7 and raised 6. So we have both raised 6 and 7, and thus this measure is utilizing the melodic minor scale. I think this melody is a good one to analyze or to observe how composers use the natural minor scale in conjunction with its 2 variants. You can see that the G sharp and the F sharp are not present in the key signature. They're called upon in these specific parts here, and they're written right on the staff there, not on the key signature, right? And they're called upon occasionally as the melody and the harmony requests it, or request it. Let me play that for you. The first 2 bars, harmonic minor. And now we're entering, excuse me, I think I said harmonic minor. What I meant was the first 2 bars are in the melodic minor, the natural minor scale. Now we're entering harmonic minor territory. Kind of a different flavor, right? Next, we're going back to natural minor. And then, here's the melodic minor. Right? Let me do an experiment. What if I played all of this in the natural minor? Right? I'm denying that strong pull of the leading tone. It sounds very different if I would do that. Already at this point sounds very different, right? We're denying that extra pull of the leading tone of the harmonic minor, which really wants us to not leave that unfinished and go back to tonic. It's a different song altogether. Whereas if we use the melodic minor, right, there's that very strong pull to not leave it unfinished and go back to tonic. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Next time we'll talk about the circle of fifths in specific relation to minor scales. Bye.